Hey everyone, it's Tracy Martirana from Holistic Wellness with Tracy. Since apples are in season, I'm craving one of my favorite desserts, apple crisp. I start by peeling and slicing enough apples to fill my baking dish. I'm using a deep pie plate, but you can also use whatever size pan you want. Simply scale the recipe up or down to fill it. I'm using mostly ruby red apples, which are on the sweeter side, and one Granny Smith apple, which is on the tart side. I like to use a combination of apples if possible, but if you're using mostly sweet apples, you can really minimize the added sugar. And really, if you're using tart apples, you need a little bit more, but still, even tart apples have a sweetness to them, so go easy on the sugar. If you have an apple peeler, corer, slicer contraption, you can use that here to speed up this process. But for me, it was easier just to peel and slice a few apples by hand rather than go to the basement and search for our peeler. I'm saving my peels and cores. You can compost these, you can make apple scrap vinegar, or you can do like I'm going to do, which is to make an apple cinnamon simmer pot. Now that I have some apples peeled, I'm going to core them and slice them. I find it's easiest to core an apple like this, simply cutting the sides off around the core. However, you can also cut the whole apple into quarters and use a paring knife, whatever works for you. You also have options when it comes to how you slice your apples. I used to do it with a paring knife like you just saw, but I found that I can do it faster and more consistent with my big knife, so that is what I'm doing. You also have the option of dicing the apples if you don't really care for slicing them, but keep in mind the thicker the apple pieces are, the longer it takes to bake. And so if the apple dices or slices are too thick, you risk burning the topping before the apples are cooked through. So I like to stick with slicing. And then I'm just going to keep slicing away until I have enough apples to fill my pan. And I actually had to come back and peel 2 more apples to fit this pie plate. I've been filling the pie plate really just to determine how many apples I needed, but I actually need to work with the apples a little first, so I'm going to transfer them to a bowl. And as always, I should have picked a bigger bowl, but I made it work. To these apples, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of white sugar. Now, if I had used more tart apples, I may have used 2 tablespoons. And if you really want it to be quite sweet, maybe add 3, but you don't need more than that. I'm adding a teaspoon of good vanilla extract, about a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, a pinch of salt, and a heaping tablespoon of flour. Mix this around. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to get the flour and the sugar and the cinnamon just blended around a little bit. And then back to the baking dish. I'm greasing it well with some avocado oil. Just use a light tasting oil or spray oil. And then I'm going to add the apples back into the pie plate, doing a little rearranging as I do it, just trying to be sure there aren't a lot of big gaps in the apples and that the top is fairly level. Then I'm just going to set these aside while I work on the topping. In the same bowl I had the apples in, because let's minimize our dirty dishes as much as possible. I'm adding a half a cup of flour, a half a cup of packed brown sugar, and then just using a fork to mix it together to break up any lumps of the sugar. And then to this, I'm adding a good 2 teaspoons of cinnamon because I really like cinnamon. I'm adding a little vanilla extract and a pinch of nutmeg. You could also add a pinch of ground allspice or ginger. Both of those would be delicious here. I'm going to stir this around and then mix in a half a cup of old-fashioned oats. Once all of this is combined, I'm drizzling in melted butter. Now, I melted a little more than I needed, so when it looked like it was getting close to being moist, I stopped adding and just continued to stir to fully incorporate the butter into the mixture. Once I have a moist but crumbly mixture, I add the topping to the apples, ensuring that the topping is evenly distributed, and then I will stick this into a 350-degree oven and bake until the apples are tender. If it seems like the topping is getting too brown and your apples aren't quite tender yet, maybe just cover it lightly with some aluminum foil for part of the cooking time. And then while the apple crisp is baking, I'm going to make my simmer pot. I previously did a video on simmer pots, and I will leave that link down in the description box. But I just start with a saucepan, add a few whole allspice, a cinnamon stick, and my apple scraps. I add enough water to cover and then turn on the heat. And once the contents are hot, I reduce the heat and allow the simmering pot to make my house smell delicious. After about 40 minutes, I used a butter knife to be sure my apples are tender, which they were, so I remove the crisp from the oven and allow it to cool for a few minutes before serving. It tastes delicious on its own, but it's even better with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. Now, go make yourself an apple crisp and have a great day.